Welcome to GrizzCast Dispatches, a new series hosted by the Grizzly Bear Foundation with urgent and informed conversations about developing stories affecting communities and grizzly bears wherever they may roam. Season 2 of GrizzCast with feature-length stories is coming soon. Until then, Dispatches will keep you connected as current events unfold. Let's begin.
So, along the coast of British Columbia, grizzly bears are on the move. Driven by innate curiosity, changing food sources, human development, and the impacts of the climate crisis, grizzlies are beginning to wander into unfamiliar places, raising questions about coexistence, conservation, and community safety. I'm Nicholas Scapillati, and in this episode of GrizzCast Dispatches, we'll follow the remarkable journey of one such bear, a young male who swam across the Salish Sea to arrive alone on Texada Island. Tex, the most recent and perhaps the most talked about grizzly bear on the move. Tex is a young male currently exploring Texada Island, the largest of the Gulf Islands. It's about 300 square kilometers and it's just off the Sunshine Coast. It's home to approximately 1,200 permanent residents. Texada Island falls within the traditional territory of the Tla'amin, Homolko, and Sechal people. Tex's story opens a window into the complexities of coexistence with wildlife and how provincial policies, indigenous leadership, and community voices shape what happens next for this bear and others like him. Today we are joined by independent scientist Dr. Lana Ciarniello. Lana is the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, the IUCN's Bear Working Group Specialist, and the lead researcher on Project Rewild, our study into orphan grizzly cub rewilding. Welcome, Lana. Did I get that right?
Thank you. Yes, you did. What's the Human Bear Conflict Expert Team that I am co-chair of for the IUCN Bear Specialist Group. Yeah.
Excellent. Even more relevant to what we're talking about today. Excellent. So we're seeing more and more grizzly bears exploring islands on the coast, including Vancouver Island, which you and I have talked a little bit about. In your experience and the history of studying grizzly bear biology and behavior, why do you think this is happening?
Right. Great question. Lots of people are certainly asking that question lately. So we have had a female with some Cubs of the Year on Northern Vancouver Island, and now we have Tex on Texada. So yeah, why is this happening? Well, there's a few reasons that why it's likely happening. And that is because we believe the grizzly bear population is expanding. So some areas are recovering. Like in Southwest BC, we have a unit of threatened populations. It's actually listed by the IUCN, these populations, but they are recovering. And that's due to a lot of effort from a lot of really great people in there. Bruce McClellan, Michelle McClellan, just to name a few organizations, Coast to Cascades. They put a lot of funding into recovering these populations, and they are starting to come back and expand out. So we're seeing that. At the same time, though, we're also seeing our population expand and develop really into a lot of areas. So you've got habitat loss occurring in some areas. So that it does is the bears expand, then they come into people, they come in those interface areas, we call them. So these kind of interface bears, right? And so moving out. So you have the few different things going on. The grizzly bear hunt was ended in 2017 in the province. We always say that a grizzly bear's generation time is around 10 years. That means from a scientific perspective, from a research perspective, we can start detecting changes in our last census in about 10 years in the population. Now in Southwest BC, that hunt was ended in the 70s. So now you have 50 years of those bears in there trying to come back. And when you depress the population that much, like we did in the Southwest BC, those pockets, it does take that longer time to see that expanse. So you have a number of factors interacting together, and as a result, we're seeing grizzly bears.
Right. So you made a really good point there. It's not the most recent ending of the hunt in British Columbia, but it's this long-term not hunting since the 70s, and this big conservation effort, not only by some of the great groups you mentioned, but also like Bruce McClellan, for example. This was official government policy as well, right, to recover these areas?
Yes, this was. And so Bruce worked a lot for the government in that area. He's retired now, as we know, but yeah.
And why are we seeing young male bears adventuring and going into these communities. Like, what's the difference between a mama bear or even just a female bear compared to these young males? Because it always seems like it's these, young, adventurous, sometimes bratty little young 4 or 5 year olds.
Yeah, great observation. You are definitely right. It vast majority of the time is these young males, and that gets back to grizzly bear biology and ecology. So within grizzly bears, the male has no vested interest in the offspring. It's raised by the females, okay? And to avoid, we have these kind of matriarchal societies where you have this female, this older female, and then she has cubs. Now, those cubs that are female, they're allowed to take part of her home range. So it kind of rings out from there. But the males, when they have to disperse, they kick them out. They've got to go. So she'll physically beat him out of there. And then when he doesn't breed, he'll have to move and establish his own range. This is something in them biologically so that they don't get a lot of inbreeding. So that these males
Brilliant.
are forced to move out because the females are ringing around that matriarch mom, right? So,
Right.
yeah, it's kind
Excellent.
of, it's fascinating.
Great. This is like an amazing conversation about, and it's important to coexistence, is really understanding what a grizzly bear, what their role is. A lot of people call them apex predators, carnivores, but as we know, they eat like 200,000 berries in a day. Their foods differ from season to season, what's available. Like, would you classify them as like a carnivore, or are they more of an omnivore, or like can you educate people about what grizzly bear's role is and what they truly eat? And
Yeah, I mean, they are classified technically as a carnivore, but they have an omnivorous diet for sure. And also their teeth, the dentation shows that. So they'll have the big pointed canines and your incisors, which you get for that, ripping, tearing meat. But then they also have these really flat molars, right? And that's like your ungulates, like your moose, your deer, things like that. And those are for grinding. So the vegetation and those things so that you can get the nutrients out of it. So they really have that sort of mixed dentation when you look at it, right? It's not just all sharp teeth fitting together like a true carnivore would have, right? So their diet is an omnivorous diet.
right, most of the time they're just grazing, right? And we've seen that in the spring on sedge grass and in the summer on berry patches, and things like that. So yeah, thanks for that description. It's great for people to understand a little bit more about how grizzlies behave and what they're up to. The other part to this conversation has been that this bear has been relocated twice. At a higher level, just for situations like this, which you're, an expert in and been involved in, can we talk about adverse conditioning and relocation versus, or translocation? And in your experience, what are the risks to the bear and the communities, and also what are the opportunities in allowing the bear to remain or trying to relocate it?
Yeah, great questions. There's a lot to know in relocation and translocation. So let's first off define them. What do they mean? Relocation is when we take an animal and we move it within its home range. So we're moving it within its home range that we know of, and we usually do relocations to buy us time. So let's say we know an animal, it's in a home range, we've got it radio collared, let's just say, and it's gotten into something, and we need to secure that attractant and deal with that behavior before it escalates, and this becomes a so-called problem bear, right?
Right.
We may take it, move it within its home range, so knowing it will full well come back to this area, but at the same time, secure this area right up. So when it gets back there, it's going to get a zap from that electric fence. On the way back, maybe if you've got a program in place, it's going to get aversive conditioning, like a rubber bullet to keep it away from something like that. And what we're trying to do is train it, alter its behavior through negative reinforcement with an association. So it all works in psychology. It's all animal behavior. It's all Pavlov's dog, right? Classical conditioning, operant conditioning. Right. Now, through translocation, what is that? That's taking a bear and moving it outside its known home range, which we believe a long distance away. We're trying to do that because we want the bear to leave and we want it to maybe stay in a different area for whatever that reason is, right? What do these bring with them? Well, They bring risks to the bear itself in immobilizing it and moving it, but really into whatever area we're putting it. So if we're saying that we're seeing grizzly bear expansion, right, and these ones coming out and now they're pushing into our areas, then these areas, they could be full or they could have a large male taking over it. So when you take this young one and you move it in there and plunk it in with this large male, the large male will kill it.
Right.
So,
yeah, so this is really interesting, the science, not only for community safety and for conservation efforts on where to take this bear, if that is the decision, but also the welfare of the individual animal. So what's the science? Can you dive into the science a little bit here about how to pick the right place to, say, translocate a bear?
Yeah, well, it depends on why is the bear there doing what it's doing. So what we're saying is, okay, Tex is 5 and he's dispersing from his natal home range, like we talked about earlier. So to take him and to put him just back into his natal home range isn't going to work. And we can tell you that right now because he's dispersing. So he's going to be like, oh, crap, now I'm back with mom. I got to leave again, right?
Right.
So
yeah.
he has to go, right? Like he has to go. That's their biology. That's how it works. So really, we kind of need to know, okay, where is Tex from? We can do that. We have an excellent database in BC. It's called the Coastal Database, and it's got all of the genotypes of the bears that myself, Michelle, number of researchers, Clayton Apps, just a number of them up and down the coast have put in all of our samples, Steve Rochetta, into this coastal database. So we could look at where Tex was from and, okay, now this is not a good place to put him back, even if it is a translocation, because maybe he's already moved 40 kilometers, 50 kilometers to, maybe he came from Jarvis Inlet to Tex, but then putting him back in Jarvis isn't going to work, right? So those are the kind of things that we need to look at and that as biologists, we have to take into consideration when we select release areas. Also, food security, as you brought up earlier, that's huge. If you're going to put him in a crappy area, he's going to move right away because he has to eat, right? So,
so we need a little bit of insight. It has to be very thoughtful about where this bear came from and how to set him up for success. But relocation, how successful has this technique been? And is it really useful in conservation? Like now you've explained the difference. How would you talk about relocation as a tool? Right.
Unfortunately, it's not very useful. First off, if you're moving a bear for a reason other than I'm going to secure the attractants that are here, relocating it, right? Then you have to take care of the problem. You have to take care of the underlying source of why the bear's there and what it's doing, because it's just gonna come back, right? What you have to get to is what the source of the problem is, and you have to take care of that. All you're doing is creating a catch-22. Another bear is going to come there. You don't take care of that source, another bear is going to come there, and then another bear is going to come there, and then another bear is going to come there. Texas may be your first grizzly bear that showed up, but if this continues the way we're going, he's not going to be your last.
So the Texada residents right now, they're not used to grizzly bears or cougars or wolves or any sort of carnivore on their island. But what advice do you have for them to help them coexist?
Yes, great question. So let's look at coexistence. Coexistence is not a lack of conflict. It's conflict at an acceptable level for both of the parties. So for the bear and for the humans. So to reach that, to live alongside a large carnivore, a grizzly bear, humans have to give as well. So the bear has to give and have a level of tolerance for humans, and the humans have to give. One of the biggest things we can do, one of the most important things we can do to keep this bear safe and so that its behavior does not escalate into negative conflict behavior is to make sure attractants are secured. And there's levels of attractants, right? Garbage, it can be a no-go. Garbage needs to be secured. It needs to be put in a bear-resistant place, stored in your garage, stored in your house if you can, not, right against the door, that kind of things where they can smell it. Then you've got things like free-ranging chickens. We should not be killing bears. I really want to emphasize this point to save chickens. Like to me, that's an insane concept. That we're killing a grizzly bear to save a chicken, which we're going to eat later. Chickens, those kind of things are solved easily by properly installed electric fences. So if you hear anybody say, oh, electric fence doesn't work for a grizzly bear, they haven't set it up right. Electric fences work like a hot damn to keep a bear out of places. Okay, but you need the right number of strands, you need the right voltage, that line needs to be clear, and it's not that expensive to do. And I believe the
Indeed.
Grizzly Bear Foundation did a report on electric fencing, and you can get information from you guys on how can we set up something around our residential gardens, around our chicken coops. So there's really steps that humans can take which are not that onerous or even expensive to implement. In one of the areas I work in, there's a cost sharing program for electric fencing, 50-50. Now, from your
Yeah.
standpoint as a human, let's say you've got all your attractants taken care of, like I do in my yard, right?
Right.
Now,
Yeah.
what am I going to do? Okay, if I know where, I'm going to make myself known. I'm going to use my voice to identify myself as human. I'm going to carry bear spray. It's really not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
You know, it sits on your hip. It's not a big deal to carry. It's not a onerous thing that's going to go off if you know how to use it and you keep the safety on it, right?
Yeah.
So there's all sorts of things that you can do to not invite a grizzly bear into your yard and to avoid an encounter in the first place.
If you do encounter a grizzly bear, there's some people are talking about being stalked by grizzly bears. But is there a difference between just being followed by a grizzly bear compared to being stalked? Because they are curious animals, and we've heard of lots of incidents where people have wonderful encounters with a grizzly bear. How would you describe that difference in that
Oh,
situation?
100% there's a difference in being stalked by a bear and just being followed by a bear. Those kind of things, when they're stalking you, they're extremely silent, head down, extremely focused. But it's so rare. It is so rare. And particularly with these interface bears like Texas,
Right.
we are just sort of finding out that these bears seem to know there's humans around. It's not like you're out in the middle of the wilderness and you've surprised a bear along a trail because you weren't making noise, that kind of thing. It's a different kind of encounter situation because they're kind of always expecting to see people. So we really don't, like, when we mine our databases for incidences that are injury related in these type of interface areas, we have very, very, very few. Like,
Right.
even including Alaska, that are living with bears, in these areas that have, a number of Texas going around there where they're living, right?
Yeah.
Very, very, very rare, extremely rare.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great
It's because they
advice.
know, right?
Yeah, you've given us some great information on the behavior of a bear, and that's really important to understand and not be, living in fear based on this Hollywood, image of a grizzly. But right now, because it's new to them and coexistence is new to them, and they have to kind of respond before they have time to get an electric fence, or maybe they don't have a bear bell yet. What advice would you give them over the next, little while they're living with text?
Okay, well, no bells. Let's get that one out there, but let's use bear spray instead. But what advice I would give them for Tex is he will leave. From a grizzly bear standpoint, that's a small island. From our standpoint, it might be like, oh, that's a huge island, right?
Right.
But not
Yeah.
from a grizzly bear standpoint, and not from a young dispersing male, right? So if you don't provide the food that he wants, he's going to move around. He wants to look for mates too at some point, right? He's going to try that out. He will move on. One thing that you should know about bears, though, is that they can be very habitual. So when he does find an area that he wants, if this is part of that area, he will likely pass through again this time next year. So let's take care of this now. Let's identify it. Let's start getting in bear resistant measures. We have an excellent program. It's called Bear Smart
Yeah.
Communities Program in BC. It's got 6 steps that you have to do, starting with your waste system, how you're managing your waste, getting in bylaws, all those kind of things, identifying where the hazards are from a bear's perspective. What's going to trap a bear? What's going to make a problem bear? And how do we manage those? It's a proactive program to get ahead of it. So I really highly recommend all of these communities on northern Vancouver Island, Texada, where these bears are starting to show up. Start these programs now. Get it going now. Start your bear smart measures mitigation now. They'll give you more time to get it in and buy it, but it's not going to be your first bear or your last bear.
Yeah.
It's not going to be your last.
It's an excellent point. We know that Not only are we experiencing a climate crisis, but we're experiencing an ecological crisis as well. And species that are in recovery, like the grizzly bear, that play a somewhat keystone role in the ecosystems they roam. They're very important for the recovery of these systems, for nutrient transfer, for seed dispersal. They're key players in us having, restoring ecosystems or ensuring healthy ecosystems. You really broke it down really nicely. It's great to speak to an expert who knows so much, and we can share that knowledge with not only the people on Texada that are experiencing this, but the wider audience. We love working with you, Lana, and thanks for taking the time to be here for GrizzCast Dispatches.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Nicholas, and thank you, Grizzly Bear Foundation, for bringing this up and talking with people and getting people to start thinking like a bear.
Thanks for listening to GrizzCast Dispatches. This report is the second in a mini-series exploring the story of Tex. Stay tuned for follow-up reports where we'll hear from the BC Conservation Officer Service on the history of Tex's journey and how their procedures and policies keep communities safe and determine the future of bears like Tex. Subscribe to GrizzCast now so you don't miss these timely interviews.
GrizzCast is hosted by the Grizzly Bear Foundation, a charitable organization solely dedicated to the welfare and conservation of grizzly bears. Support our work by making a donation at grizzcast.grizzlybearfoundation.com and get on our mailing list. This episode was produced by Lindsay Marie Stewart and Sarah Vikra. Music composed by Aloe. Sound editing and voiceover by Sarah Vikra. Nicholas Scapillati is the executive producer and host of GrizzCast. Season 2 of GrizzCast is coming soon, so stay connected. Please share and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.